Hello and welcome to the NeuroDivergent Fitness Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Meaghan. I am a personal trainer, dancer, and a lover of octopuses.
And I am Ryan Sullivan. I'm a personal trainer, former martial artist, culinarian, lover of food, and cats.
Ooh, cats. Aw, your cat is so cute. Okay, so today we are going to talk about where we left off in the last episode, which was what the human movement method is and why it's applicable to the fitness industry, personal trainers, clients, everything. And to start off, I want to explain a story where something happened to me. It was, I think, a couple weeks ago. I was in a bookstore and I was checking out, and I gave them my email so I can get little updates or whatever. And my email has fitness in it, and so they're like, "Oh, are you like a trainer or a group exercise instructor?" I was like, "Oh, actually, I am a trainer." And then they're like, "Oh, where at?" I'm actually in between gyms because I'm looking for something different. And I was like, "Oh, what's going on? Like, why don't you like the current gym?" And she's like, "Well, I'm getting a little bit older. My body isn't really like handling some of the things, and I just I have some conditions going on." So one of the conditions she has is the split from the abdomen.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the name of it. It starts with a D. And so I was like, "Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about." And she's like, "You know what I'm talking about?" And I was like, "I do know what you're talking about. And I do know how to help you. And there are different options for you that are not just beating yourself up." And I was like, "Oh, I'm actually teaching a restorative strength class," and started to go into a little bit of some of the methods. And then the other girl who was working at the bookstore was like, "Oh, I actually have a chronic illness, and I used to try CrossFit. That didn't work for me." And I was like, wild. And so the reason I bring this up is because I think a lot of times we think that there's an all or nothing mentality, which we kind of got to in the last episode. And there are so many ways to move your body that is not just a strict press, not just a standard machine workout at the gym. And we're going to kind of dive into what that looks like for the human movement method today.
Yeah, so the sort of in my experience throughout my fitness career, which spans somewhere between 25 to 30 years, depending on how you want to measure the beginning. One of the things that I've seen throughout all the time that I've worked with people is that movement has certain patterns to it. And I got really interested in this, and I started researching what I call the how humans evolved. I got really, really focused on this for a period of time because after learning about studying Tom Meyer's work with the myofascial meridian system, and I learned the Yanda method, which is what brought us kind of early neuromuscular reprogramming. For a while, I was a powerlifting instructor and coach, and I was also a competitor in powerlifting. And I also had been doing kettlebell for, God, 15 years. These are all really good methodologies and modalities, but there's this, at least in the period that I've existed with the fitness industry, there's been this idea that all you need is this one thing. All you need is this one thing, and that's all you're ever going to need. There's always kind of that attitude. And I've actually found that variety, particularly when I was powerlifting, variety is better than honing things down. And since anyone can go online and anybody can find what they call push, pull, squat, hinge, and plank programming. That is not hard to find. It's pretty normal. And now functional programming is that plus a carrying and a prowler crawl and whatever. And those are all really good forms. But the thing is, if you're a person that has a neuromuscular disorder, or if you're a person that has a chronic illness, or if you're a person that doesn't tolerate high intensity exercise, where do you go? What do you do? Oh, do cardio.
Just
Do
do
cardio.
yoga.
Just do yoga.
And
and
just walk.
just walk, because you got to do something and whatever. And honestly, I've done high intensity, I've done high impact, and as I've aged, I'm 42, going on 43 years old now, and I just don't see myself doing that and expecting the medical industry to support me through it for the next 25 years. Like, I'm not really interested in taking TRT. I'm not really interested in having my joints replaced. I'm not really interested in being in and out of PT. I want something that's going to give me good results for my health and wellness. And I don't know if you've noticed this in your own world, but from the aesthetic viewpoint, I'm not really worried about having a beach body at 43. What I'm worried about is making sure that I maintain really good functionality into 60 and 70 and 80. That's my number one concern.
100%.
And I think I'm not alone in that.
You are 100% not alone. And I think, at least for me, to point on your last topic, talk about your last topic, the aesthetic part is that if I feel good in my body, and that means I don't have inflammation in my body, is like the main thing that I'm looking for. What that means is diet, the way that your nervous system is responding to exercise. Those are the main concerns that I'm thinking about when it comes to strength training and like how often and what type of training I'm doing. So to kind of back it up a little bit, I went through many different phases of training for my own self as a dancer, starting with, I think when I was like 20 or so, high intensity everything, just as much possible impact that I could put on my body in ways I had no idea was even possible, which is great and also pretty detrimental long term. Great in that you could be like, oh yeah, I can do the thing. However, the impacts of the thing were lesser known at that time, at least compared to where I'm at now. So young, started dancing probably the most consistently when I was like in college. And so what that means is I was learning routines, I was performing, I was also working out in addition to that. And then after college, did some professional dancing where I was not at the point, let me back up. When I was doing professional dancing, I was dancing for like 3 to 4 hours a day because I was someone who was less skilled in the technique and needed to like refine my technique. So I was going in with the technique and in addition to that, working on my strength so that I could have the muscle capacity to do the routines in a way that wasn't like exerting all of my energy all the time. So after that, I stopped dancing professionally and I started going more towards like traditional workouts where it wasn't powerlifting, but I was that person who was spending 2 to 3 hours in the gym trying every single exercise you could possibly find because I was just interested in it. Do you remember that phase? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. It was a good exploration phase to add to the variety conversation that you were talking about. And then I'm still dancing now, so I integrate dancing in with CrossFit. I started doing some CrossFit, which we can kind of touch on the positive and negatives of that. I will say the one positive that we can probably both agree on is the variety aspect that CrossFit has given to the fitness industry. And so that part is really interesting to look at. And then here we are now. I am a personal trainer. I am learning a lot of techniques from Ryan and also from the different people that Ryan's learned from, including Tom Myers, who I'm starting to dig into even further. In addition to being around dancers who have injuries going on, which I find so interesting to try and understand, one, how they got there, and two, the different methods that you can integrate that are not even that hard to do that have a dramatic impact on dance.
Yeah, and the main concept that we're going at with the human movement method and how we solve these there are really common pathological issues that people have. So in the system that I've developed and I utilize and I teach, we start from the ground up. We start looking at what is the foot doing, what is the bridge of the foot doing, what is the ankle doing, what is the knee doing, what is the hip doing, how is the pelvis moving, yada, 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 all the way up to how the head orients itself over feet. And the reason for this is because evolutionarily speaking, the body prioritizes certain movements, and it's going to be standing, sitting, laying, walking, jogging, running, and you can pretty much take those three and consider them one. And then you've got pushing, pulling, climbing, crawling, carrying, and throwing. And pretty much everything we do outside that is a modified version of those core movements. And what I mean by that is my experience as a martial artist. I would say that grappling is an extension of climbing and crawling. I would say swimming is an extension of climbing and crawling. I would say that punching and kicking is an extension of throwing. They're very similar mechanics, very similar dynamics, but what you see in these global movements, in these athletic style movements, is that they use every joint in the body, and they use every joint in the body in a very specific way. I refer to humans as rotational engines. And so in the modern world, we don't use our rotational joints properly. We don't use our feet properly. We don't get the stimulus, or the word that I like to use is the enrichment that we need to keep our nervous systems healthy and alive, to keep these muscles in balance. And so the human movement method is about learning how to spot those issues, have a plan for how they show up, and how to work through it with clients, or work through it on yourself, or work through it with your trainer, so that way you're resolving these issues and then reintegrating them into global movements that can benefit sports. It can help you live a longer, healthier life with better overall dynamic movement. And it's about bulletproofing you against common problems like falls and other basic injuries that people have because of their given activity or sport.
One of the things that I really appreciate about the system is the emphasis and the learning of where you are in space through these movements. That is something that you kind of learn without really realizing that you're learning it. And so when you're going for some of these movements, like if you're pulling on a band and you are not, like, it's not a machine telling you where to go. It is not a bar telling you where to go or control or restricting your movement. You then have to control and understand where your leg is, where your feet are, where your hips are, where your shoulders are, everything in space relative to the other joints in order to complete that movement. And that is a very different way of thinking than like up and down, up and down, up and down.
Well, and to your point there, actually, in talking about kind of nervous system orientation and that, there are some people, not all movement is mindful. I have a client, she's a body worker, and you actually work with her too, Cassie. And yeah, Cassie's great. And so it's she has a business called Resonant Bodies. She said not all movement is mindful. Some movement is disassociation and distraction. And you see this a lot with exercise, where I personally highly try to get my clients to come into their bodies and ground and be aware of where they are in space. You need to understand where you are in space. This is not a mindless action. And the thing is, I think a lot of people are like, well, I had a piece of pie. I need to burn the calories. I'm just going to go in and do 100 burpees and 20 minutes of cardio. Why are my knees on fire? And it's because mindful movement, mindful practice of these movements is how you get better long term. It's 100%. Not just moving the bigger weight. It's not, it's about having good technique. It's about having good form. And personally, I believe that the of all the sapiens, Homo sapiens excel at moderate levels of exertion over long periods of time. We excel in an efficient way. Now, can we do explosive training and build hypertrophy and do all of that? Yes.
100%.
But if the goal is to move better, that's going to involve efficiency, that's going to involve balance, that's going to involve coordination, that's going to understand a global awareness. which is different than if I'm trying to grow the biggest muscles possible. That involves overloading a muscle by isolating it between two joints or in very specific compound movements. And so you can do both. You can train both. There's no reason that you shouldn't be training. Actually, frankly, there's no reason that you shouldn't at least be training the evolutionarily prioritized movements in the way that you can move most effectively to where you can handle the compound stuff. But there may be a point at which you're not really interested in the compound stuff anymore. And that's just kind of where I've gotten to personally.
Yes, I can relate to that. Also, as someone who is going through an injury right now, who is very focused on isolations, because that's how you keep going.
Mm-hmm.
I got you.
Well, and again, like, for example, when we solving the problem, what we do is we go through a process of starting at isolation at the joint, waking the muscles up, bringing back the rotational capacity of, let's say, the hip joint, and then reintegrating the hip into the knee, ankle, and foot, and then saying, okay, now that leg's online and working properly, we're now going to extend that out into a global view. And all the movements, all the core movements of the system are global movements. Even the arm movements are global movements. Because your arms are really, I often say your arms are just an extension of your legs. If your arms are not getting power from your legs, something is terribly wrong.
Okay. I think about like a jerk motion. Like when you do a jerk overhead, like a lot of that power is coming from your legs.
Kettlebell snatch. Common. It's all hips, all legs. A punch is not from your arm. Your whole body. Watch Mike Tyson throw a punch and tell me that guy's hitting with his arm.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Yep. Also, like kettlebell swings.
Yeah.
Lower body.
Lower body.
I think about
whole body. It's whole body.
Whole body. It's whole body.
Yeah.
And then I think about like massage therapists. Like a lot of their techniques are not coming from their hands.
No.
And they're not at all.
No.
Yep.
No. When I do manual work, so I'm a mobility coach. I'm a nutrition coach. I'm a wellness coach. I'm a personal trainer. Blah blah blah. But when I do, one of the things I work with is tool assisted soft tissue release and manipulation. And even then, when you're working with people or doing mobility training, you're not grabbing on and using your arms. You're hooking and positioning your body. That's same thing. Martial arts. If you think for 1 second that you're going to do any kind of a we'll say a wrist lock or an elbow lock or a shoulder lock, you do that through footwork. You move your body around. You do not think that you're just going to grab onto someone's arm and crank on it. That's not how it works at all.
In the crump world, people get made fun of if they keep their body in the same spot and then they just like use their arms to do all the movements. See, that's crumping right there.
The key is to make this face.
Yeah, that is part of it a little bit, but. Yeah, the people who are like really good are the ones who are able to like move their bodies and use it with their arms. Yeah. Very good.
And so there's a lot of research that's been done on how if people have joint pain, joint arthritis, joint reconstruction, how there are methods for bringing those joints back online from isolation to integration to dynamic to explosive. And that's the process that we work through. And as trainers, this gives us an incredible ability to scale with clients when they have injuries. This gives us the ability to build in a lot of performance level training. This also gives us the ability to have a whole toolbox for doing diagnostic work when somebody first walks in the door. And this is why we're going to be doing this intensive in Detroit in April, where we're going to be going through the diagnostic system. We're going to be going through the core movements. We're going to be going through a lot of these common pathologies and what the protocols are for going through this isolation, isolation, we isolate it, we integrate it into the system and then do dynamic movement and then get into this high level performance. And the thing is, if you have an 80-year-old client, you might stop at integration, but still it's better that they have control and balance and coordination than if you're like, okay, all right, Granny, let's see those burpees. Or whatever, I don't know. But my point is,
something
is
completely
that,
inappropriate, yeah.
yeah, my point is that it is not uncommon for the general advice to, the idea is, okay, well, you've completed PT, now it's time to do the general thing. And that may not be ideal for some people.
Yeah. So for going back to this being a resource for trainers, I know for me, having someone walk in the door that's like, I have had low back pain since Wednesday and I can't get rid of it and it hurts so bad to like move, and having methods that you can actually help that situation so that you're not just avoiding the back. You're not just like, okay, let's do bicep curls today. No, we're going to address that so that way when you leave, you have more mobility, you aren't in pain, and you are more stable than when you got there. That is an incredible value that you're adding to your clients or giving to your clients, opposed to being like, okay, just don't touch it. I don't know.
Well, and also you can, if you understand the theory, you can educate them in how they can have different movement strategies to avoid doing that in the future.
Yep.
And one of the things I'm working on right now is a resource so that people can simply, like, for example, Cassie's an example. I know she's coming to the intensive, and she wants the ability to understand the perspective as a body worker so that she can help her clients understand those strategies as well. That's well within her purview. And so that's really, really important. She's also an aerial instructor and she does other modalities. But basically what I'm saying is that personal trainers, check. Body workers, check. I mean, all the myofascial stuff we've learned is from Tom Myers, and he's a manual therapist. He's not a trainer. Yeah. Like, it's about understanding how the pieces fit together. And so,
and how it's connected to other systems.
Yeah, and how it's connected to other systems. And this is something that when you can see the bigger picture and you can help your clients see the bigger picture, you're not just a trusted resource. You're the person that they trust to help them solve these problems. And those are your client retention is massive in that state. And as an individual, when you feel your own problem, okay, oh, my left knee's giving me a hard time, you just immediately know to regress your training and start building back up again. It's not fretting or ignoring it for 3 weeks until it gets chronically worse and then yada yada yada. It's no, okay, I can just slide up and down the scale and do what I need to do, and I know that there's a roadmap no matter what.
Yeah, I actually had a client yesterday who we were just talking about this, where she was like, I really appreciate the mentality of not just keep going, go harder, try more, do it again, instead of like doing exactly what you just said. Pull it back a little bit, readjust, and then you can integrate back in. Where before she was just not doing anything because she felt like she couldn't. So, yeah. And I think that it gets a lot of people too. Like, it seems like it's a small mentality, but that mentality kind of takes over the ability to like even start sometimes.
Well, and it's because the voice that I think the voice that we hear as an industry really comes from 5 or 10% of the entire population. We're all trying to emulate 5 or 10% of the population, not realizing that. I'll just use Ronnie Coleman as an example. If you don't know who Ronnie Coleman is, please Google Ronnie Coleman. He was a bodybuilding champion. He's in a wheelchair now. So if you are emulating Ronnie Coleman at his peak, it is possible that it did terrible damage to your body, because it certainly did terrible damage to his.
And also, okay.
I was going to say, and not everyone has the same genetic capacities.
Yes. That's what I was gonna get into. It's like, speaking of the wheelchair, it's like we are given advice to a very able-bodied
Mm-hmm.
person, typically is who this advice is for, and for like very specific like genetics, where everybody's genetics are different. Also, like the body that you're working with is gonna react very different from somebody else, depending on your genetics, able-bodyism, what your environment, what your
Mm-hmm.
nervous system is doing,
Yeah.
it has done in the past, all of those factors.
Oh, yeah. And the body I have at 42 is not the body I had at 32, and it certainly is not the body I had at 22. And my needs, wants, and desires change at those
Yes.
all those ages. And so it's important to have the tools because the thing is, everyone can squat, everyone can deadlift. It doesn't make you a better, I mean, and believe me, I actually have a deep, deep passion for teaching good form in powerlifting and good form in kettlebell. You've worked with me. I am an
Yep.
absolute stickler. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And the reality is I don't want to disparage those sports, but they're sports. They're not lifelong paths to health and wellness. They're sports. And uh,
Yep. That's
you
what I
know,
think about with CrossFit a lot.
yeah,
Like,
it's a sport.
it's a sport. It's a
It's
sport.
a sport. Ultra marathoning is a sport. It is not
Mhm.
necessarily a path to lifelong health and wellness. The reality is the human body is designed to do very specific things.
Mhm.
And throughout the course of human history, we've entered a time period where we do them less and less and less and less dynamically. And so I have this theory I call rotational engine theory, and that's what we're going to cover at the intensive, is this idea that we need to look at the body from the perspective that a human is a rotational engine. We generate rotational movement to produce linear force. And so if linear force is causing you problems, it's because something's wrong in the rotational elements. And if we go in and start rebuilding those rotational elements up, and not only building them up, but making them powerful, you're going to see a significant difference in performance. Because a bench press is a line that is generated by a lot of rotational forces. So it's important to understand that human bodies are rotational engines, and that's the theory, and that's the core unifying theory of what the human movement method kind of builds these pathologies off of. And we're going to be building a resource for people to use to really be able to transfer that knowledge to others. And that's the important piece.
I think that's a good segue to talk about the rest of the series that we're putting together now. This is
Mm-hmm.
episode 2 of the series, is kind of outlining that and then deep diving into the individual subjects pretty much. So the next episode we're going to talk about is like the isolations. And so when it comes to like specific joints and specific areas of the body, common things that we see that we had talked about today a little bit, like the rolled shoulders, the ankle issues that are going on, things that are going on with your gait, things that are going on with your breathing even. Yeah, it's a big one. We are growling. We're back to the growling.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know. You're going to get one growl out of me an episode and then an arm fold. That's going to happen at least once an episode.
Uh, this one it took a little bit longer to get to the growl, so I feel like that's good. That's good. Anywho, okay. Anything to wrap up this episode you want to conclude with other than that face?
Okay, so this will be my shameless self-promotion. If you
Okay.
want to learn about the Detroit Intensive, please go to humanmovementmethod.com. It is the Detroit Intensive. I will also be presenting at EU 4YA it's a Central European. I was invited to present there at a Central European Fitness Conference, so you can catch me there. And then hopefully we're going to be doing one of these in Prague later in the year. So if we're in the U.S., Detroit, If we're in Poland, Poland. And if we're in Prague, Prague. But I'd really I'm hoping that we'll get the chance to really empower people, not just the clients, but also the trainers, to start to help their clients get out of these issues or significantly improve them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the spot that we are going to be at in Detroit for this intensive is Vamanos, which is in Southwest Detroit. Super excited to be in that space. They provide a lot of different community activities. They have exercise classes at 5:45 a.m. if you're looking for super early classes, but you should check them out. They just have a lot of awesome stuff, art community, fitness community, and just overall community events.
And why is it in Detroit? Because Detroit is awesome, and Detroit is the home base for Meaghan and I when I am in the States. And also, you can reach Meaghan in Ferndale. The office is just outside just in Ferndale.
My shameless plug? Was that the lead in to my shameless plug?
Yes, please shamelessly plug.
So I have Markawee Fitness, which is in Ferndale, Michigan, which is about 15 minutes outside Detroit. And there I do one-on-one trainings, but also we have boxing classes on Monday nights. And I'm going to start doing a restorative strength class there also. And I teach a strength class actually in Detroit, not at my studio. And that is on Friday night. So if you're interested in any of those, markaweefitness.com or on Instagram.
Yep. Yeah. So next time we're going to get into isolation and pathology. So hope you guys enjoy.
Thank you.